Thank you very much, Hafsa. I'd be delighted to address the question. Let me just first say thank you for inviting me to participate. With this distinguished group of panelists, and what I really appreciate is that I have an opportunity to participate in a woman-led initiative. So, absolutely, we need to empower women and give women a voice. And I credit you for your efforts, and thanks to also the Minnesota Institute of the Horn of Africa Studies and the United Women of the Horn and the Tigrayan Action Committee. Let me just start by saying, as we've now hit the 3-month mark since the Pretoria Agreement was reached, that we really do need to commend those who were in Pretoria. And I see, obviously, Getachew Reda is here with us today, and then hopefully National Security Advisor Redwan, who was the lead negotiator for the government of Ethiopia, will participate in this call. But it's important that, as Getachew indicated, the guns have been silenced. And it is very important to remember that the name of the actual agreement is not the cessation of hostilities agreement, it's the permanent cessation of hostilities agreement. And by that, it is the United States' interest and focus to try to ensure that the agreement holds and delivers a lasting peace for the Tigrayan people and for all people in Ethiopia and for the affected other regions of Afar and Amhara. And I want to emphasize that we have supported African solutions for African problems. And while the AU obviously was in the lead, the United States is proud to have been able to contribute as an observer and be part of the negotiations, and continues to, on a daily basis, follow through to make sure that the implementation agreement is realized in the best interest of the people of Tigray and the people of Ethiopia. I will just say that it is heartening to hear from Getachew the progress that has been made and that continues to be made. And it is essential, of course, that all those who need humanitarian assistance are able to receive it. There's full restoration of services, and the progress continues to be made, that disarmament has begun. And certainly what we've seen with the beginnings of the withdrawal groups, critically important, but that also needs to include the withdrawal Tigray, as was agreed upon in Pretoria, as you move forward with further TPLF disarmament. But one of the issues in the lead-in to your question, sexual violence, which has been horrific, and we must all recognize that the last 2 years of war were devastating for Tigray and for Ethiopia, and that now that peace is taking hold, part of the agreement, Pretoria and Getachew Reda referred to it, is the need for accountability for those who have committed gross violations of human rights, untold incidents of sexual violence, rape, the government certainly, when Prime Minister Abiy was here for the African Leaders Summit and met with Secretary Blinken and our National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, and as well as in the follow-up call that the Secretary had with the Prime Minister on January 21st. So we will continue to push for that. You will see recently Linda Thomas Greenfield was in Somalia, and she's someone who our U.S. ambassador who is a voice for women, but importantly highlights the issues of abuse of women and sexual violence that occur in war. And our Assistant Secretary, Molly Fee, will be coming to Ethiopia on the occasion of the African mid. So be, I'm sure, addressing some of these issues. So the United States and the Biden administration is fully committed to trying to develop a strong partnership with deal with difficult issues or Oromia, in that there are going to be now similar incidents to what we saw in Tigray happening there. team in Addis, led by our Chargé Tracy Jacobson, is very focused on all issues pertaining to all Ethiopians throughout the entire country. And so while today we're very focused on making sure the implementation of the Cessation of Hostilities Agreement delivers for the Tigrayan people, that you can rest assured the United States will remain fully engaged and wanting to be a partner. And I applaud the diaspora, those Ethiopian Americans who are trying to be a force for good and to promote really a better circumstance for many, many Ethiopians who are struggling today. And I'm proud also that the United States is the greatest donor and supporter of humanitarian assistance to Ethiopia, and you can rest assured that will continue. But the work is not done. A responsibility as Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa to remain fully engaged, and I look forward to my next trip to Ethiopia in the not too distant future, but also to continue to have these conversations and looking for solutions and looking for the positive. There's been trauma and suffering, but it's important to rebuild, and that rebuilding and reconstruction needs to take place, and that for that you are going to need the international. So I appreciate the voices that I've heard today calling for greater international support to reinforce again the developments that need to take place to create again the conditions for all Ethiopians. Let me stop there. I can spend a couple more minutes, but then as you mentioned, I have a prior event. But again, I appreciate this opportunity, and each time I do events like this, I learn from you, and it's invaluable to hear the different voices and concerns, and I hope you'll always find that the United States is a friend, is a partner that will want to be engaged. We may not agree on all issues, but we certainly want to hear the various voices, and when it comes to empowering women, you can rest assured that we'll be there in support, and I look forward to more exchanges like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Mike Hammer, for joining our panel, and especially for doing so short notice and being supportive. Michael Rubin, the Horn of Africa is changing in more ways than one. As a political analyst and a scholar, a researcher, what are your predictions on what may happen, especially given the endless violence export coming out of Eritrea, the unrest in Somaliland, the underreported mobilization and fight against Al-Shabaab in Somalia?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to the Minnesota Institute of Horn of Africa Studies. We can always use some good quality discussion of different regions in Africa and Washington, D.C., and if it takes Minnesota to get us there, more power to it. Thank you for what you're doing. Look, I'm married to a Russian refugee, and she tells a Russian joke about the difference between an optimist and a pessimist. The Russian pessimist is the one who says, no, things have never been so bad. War, violence, the economy, the environment, they couldn't possibly get worse. And the Russian optimist is the one who says, no, they can always get worse. So unfortunately, I'm going to give a little bit of an optimistic outlook to what I see right now. During the course of the conflict, I had the opportunity to ask a question to an Ethiopian official, a cabinet minister, and I asked, what mistakes, looking back over the last year and a half at that point in time, do you see that President Abiy has made, or more like, I wasn't trying to get him to blame President Abiy, but what in internal discussions, is there any lesson learned? Is there any acknowledgement of how bad decisions had led to this point in time, to this violence? And I just got silence. I got the sense that at the very top within Ethiopia, there wasn't a willingness to have accountability, or at least a discussion about how Ethiopia had gone so far off the tracks and had become embroiled in this collective disaster, which has cost hundreds of thousands of lives, has displaced millions more, and is, I'm sorry, nowhere far from concluding. Because now that Pandora's box is open, it's going to be very difficult to close it, especially if President Abiy thinks he's won. That's the most dangerous situation. It's all well and good to have peace, But if he believes that the price is worth it, that's where we get further ethnic violence, state-centered violence against various groups into the future. What I'm worried about as well is, and I commend the Special Envoy Ambassador Mike Hammer, but as he knows, and I also commend, for that matter, the Biden administration, which from the very start has been very interested in the events in the Horn of Africa. President Biden is genuinely concerned about this. I'm saying this as someone who's politically opposed to President Biden, but credit where credit is due. He is sincere when it comes to this issue. That said, what I'm most concerned about, and this will get to your question with regard to the greater Horn of Africa region, is now that through the efforts of the State Department, through the efforts of the National Security Council, behind the scenes in discussions with the Kenyans, with the African Union, and so forth, we've gotten to this, well, I won't call it a peace agreement, but this truce. What I worry is that, and I say this as an analyst rather than an advocate, that the United States isn't going to maintain its focus. Once there is quiet, the attention in Washington, which traditionally has attention deficit disorder when it comes to national security, might move on in a different direction. I'm not talking about the Africa Bureau. I'm not talking about Ambassador Mike Hammer, who are very, very sincere. But I'm talking about getting to the 7th floor of the State Department, to the principals in the White House, and so forth. We need to make sure that we're not at the end of that Washington understands this isn't the beginning of the end. This really is the end of the beginning. Now, when it comes to African solutions for African problems, I understand the origin of this phrase. I've heard it from certainly people like Paul Kagame in Rwanda, certainly from the African Union, and so forth. But African solutions for African problems doesn't need to be an excuse to foist off what really is an international issue. Because if we want to look at African solutions for African problems, well, Truth and Reconciliation Committees, to make sure there is justice for the gender-based violence and the other crimes against humanity, we have, of course, precedents in South Africa. We have precedents in Liberia. We have precedents in Morocco, and so forth. So there are African solutions that can be applied, not to push away interested parties, but to embrace the best practices. If we want to look at democracy, well, why shouldn't we look at countries like Botswana, South Africa, and say there's no reason why Ethiopia, and for that matter, Eritrea, shouldn't be judged by the same standards? I would urge the United States to call out the Eritreans directly. We're not talking about non-ENDF forces. We're talking about an Eritrean army which is illicitly on Ethiopian soil in a manner which is undercutting very much the security not only of Ethiopia, but the entire region. What we've learned is what happens in Ethiopia doesn't stay in Ethiopia. We've already seen blowback in Djibouti. We've seen blowback in Somalia, at least under the time of Mohamed Farmajo, with regard to the forced impressment and human trafficking of young Somalis who were sent to Eritrea for quote-unquote training. The fact of the matter is we have a real problem there. Now, when I've talked to African leaders, one thing as an academic, I'm not a diplomat, I'll speak directly. One thing that is a problem that has impact beyond Ethiopia's border is the personality of Abiy Ahmed. Abiy Ahmed not only has a messiah complex, which still continues, but as other African leaders and people who have been directly in the room with him in a way where I have not, say, there's a way that African leaders talk to other African leaders. And there's a way that African leaders talk to their people. And they're different. Abiy Ahmed doesn't differentiate between the two, and therefore he tends to want to spin a lot of lines and a lot of falsehoods that might have their place in a public declaration, but shouldn't have their place if you really want to have peace between equals, or if you want to bring in others of your peers, other heads of state and so forth, other heads of government, in order to ensure that there is a broader peace. I worry that this personality flaw, this desire to maintain a personal power, to not recognize mistakes is going to lead to a situation that we've seen with other countries, including Isaias Afwerki, including people like Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Turkey, where in order to distract from failures inside a country, one whips up nationalist sentiment and either directs it against a minority in one's own country or directs it against that the Ethiopian government is not up to this, and that the international community and African Union don't have the attention span to ensure that we're not rewarding Abiy for the violence which has been perpetrated, but at the same time we're not allowing that violence to become a distraction from much more serious issues that need to be discussed within Ethiopia. And that's the problem. And I say this in conclusion, that threatens to undermine the stability of the broader Horn, Sudan, Somalia, Somaliland, Djibouti, and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael Rubin. That was, again, very, very informative. Mr. Getachew Reda, I would like to direct this next question to you. Hopefully still with us, and I'm happy that you are. I know you're not feeling too well. There are reports and conversations coming out of Tigray and even within the diaspora that there are efforts to block or hinder the documentation of acts of genocide and war crimes. Are these reports true? And what is the government of Tigray doing to support accountability and transitional justice, as you mentioned, you highlighted briefly earlier?
Yeah.
It's a heavy question, but it would help a lot of people who have been asking that question the last 3 months.
Are
you able to hear me?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Are you able to hear me now, or?
Well, I haven't heard a word.
Okay, well, let me repeat, I guess, the question. I said there are reports and conversations coming out of Tigray and even within the diaspora that there are efforts to hinder perhaps the documentation of the acts of genocide that happened in Tigray or the war crimes, right? And that maybe the government of Tigray doesn't support the transitional justice process of some sort. But I mean, what are your views? I know you highlighted that briefly earlier, but what are your views on that rhetoric, that very, dangerous rhetoric that it's, that's taken over the diaspora and many other communities as well?
Well, to the extent that people have suspicions about the government of Tigray trying to hinder the whole issue of accountability, I think that's absolutely preposterous. For one thing, to assume that we would negotiate away accountability is downright reckless, because I cannot negotiate away accountability. I cannot negotiate away Abiy's accountability for whatever crimes he's alleged to have committed, and he cannot negotiate away my accountability as long as there are allegations that are going to be attributed to it. So what we are saying at this point in time is, Pretoria was essentially about cessation of hostilities. It was about silencing of the guns, but there were a number of issues that were included in Pretoria that we knew would be problematic, especially when it comes to the implementation process. So what we have been doing so far is try to improvise as we go and expect to create an understanding between our two sides. The whole issue of transitional justice is something something that is being discussed, but accountability for the government of Tigray to even consider for a moment standing in the way of accountability in whatever form, that's downright unacceptable. I mean, it's whether diaspora. I mean, I have heard some ridiculous stories of the Tigray government is standing in the way of I don't know, or tampering with documentation. Why would that happen? There is no such a thing as Tigray government trying to tamper with evidence, because what we want to achieve in Tigray is justice. Thousands of war wounded who need to be taken care of. There are no medical supplies. We have millions of people who have been displaced, and we have to take care of the displaced. So who all over malicious decision, who remains silent under even constant call for communications by the diaspora, simply because we wanted to maintain a modicum of normalcy, a modicum of peace. I would say we know the diaspora have been very active and very consistent when it comes to exposing the crimes that have been visited upon their people, and he feels that our failure to communicate the process that led to Pretoria and whatever happened since Pretoria has contributed to the confusion. And thank you, Hafsa, in fact, for creating this opportunity. Although I have serious issues. Speak as physicians and the international on areas that that mean a lot to the not just to the peace of Tigray, but also to the very survival and existence of the people of Tigray. As a nation, we've been threatened and our survival has been at stake. And what we're trying to achieve at this point is to make sure that the kind of conflict that was claiming hundreds of thousands will not end up claiming the entire Tigrayan population. And I think we have achieved a modicum of results in that regard. But this is something we still continue to work really seriously on federalism and Tigray, whether Abiy has an appetite for multinational federalism is irrelevant, because if he is genuinely interested in maintaining a modicum of normalcy in Ethiopia, the only way he can achieve that is by recognizing the fact that Ethiopia is a multi-ethnic society, and there is no way that state could survive without duly recognizing this fact. In fact, as far as we're concerned, it's not just the existing constitution that can ensure the survival of the Ethiopian state. In fact, if we should go beyond that and probably renegotiate the constitution to such an extent that we'll have more freedom, not less freedom, more autonomy, not less autonomy. So, yeah, there are a number of issues we could raise. Like I told you, we still live in a very troubled region. The Eritreans are still creating more problems, not only in Tigray, but also in other parts of the country, and in Sudan, in Somalia, and elsewhere in the region. And this is something we should really be worried about. And Tigray, the conflict in Tigray has been an integral part of the challenge that is bedeviling the entire Horn of Africa region. And with the right mix of choices of policies, and with the right involvement of the international community, we could not only maintain a modicum of peace and normalcy, but also work towards a much more enhanced cooperation in the entire region. And if Ethiopia is going to contribute its part, like Michael Rubin was saying, it has to find a way to come to terms with the fact that it has failed miserably, especially the government cannot continue to deny responsibility for what has happened as a result of the proclivity to address every politics through it is that will continue to suffer, and it is going to be an existential crisis as far as Ethiopia is concerned. We know there are communal violences here and there, in Benishangul, in Oromia, in Amhara. It is as if every nation and nationality are pitted against each other. And the only way you can address that is by recognizing the fact that Ethiopia as a multi-ethnic federation, in fact, should go beyond the existing constitution to accommodate the need for more autonomy, not less autonomy. I don't know. I wish I could say more, but like I said, I have one issue. I hope this is not going to be my last engagement with your institute. And I would give a shout out to Ma'wil and Hausen and Mike. Both Michael Rubin and Mike Ham, and Faisal Roble, whom I bumped into in Nairobi last time I was in Nairobi. I hope we'll continue to engage each other, and it's been quite a challenge for us to get some message out. But I hope we'll do more, and let's keep in touch. Thank you. I have difficulty focusing. I'm so sorry, but yeah, I'll definitely keep in touch, Hafsa.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Reda. Your attendance and feedback is highly appreciated.
Thank you.
So, current intercommunal and interfaith violence is ravaging Ethiopia. We are hearing on the 12th of this month, Orthodox churches are conducting public rallies. The likelihood of these rallies turning violent is indisputable. The landlocked country is used to violence between communities more than it is between followers of, say, whatever faith. Faisal, in your own words, how can conflicts between Afar, Somali, Oromo, Amhara, Tigray, and now Orthodox followers be effectively resolved? And do you view the intercommunal conflicts, existing in parts of Ethiopia, connected to atrocities happening in places like Las Anod? And yeah, what are your overall views on that issue?
Yeah, thank you, Hafsa. I think, the region has always been short when it comes to self-determination and accepting the rights of people, little people, if you will, or people who don't have the state power. And intercommunal violence are two levels. One is the one that happens, say, between Somalis and Afar and Somalis and Oromo and Tigray and, say, Afar. Those are usually government engineered, in my opinion. And I think those conflicts have been intensifying since Abiy took power. The Somali-Afar conflict was never something that people really just looked at it in a big way. Afar-Tigray conflict was not even also registering in the radar for a long time because people respect each other, although they may have difference. I think the devastating conflict is always the community that assumes the power versus the ones that they want to rob. The current Oromo-Somali conflict is very serious, simply because Abdissa is a close ally of Abiy Ahmed, his right-hand man, and he has been putting tremendous undue pressure on Somalis. If you know that he unilaterally putting a dam to the tune of 400 million birr, only 10 kilometers from Jijjiga, which is the capital city of the Somalis. Although the existing Ethiopian constitution says that no other regional government should put or come or place a project within 60 kilometers of a region's capital. So because the Somali regional president is your typical political retailer, meaning always selling his soul to the highest bidder, who initially, when the Tigray war was waging, sold his entire soul to the war and, advocated for violence and war just to be on the good side of the then what he told Amara elites, is now also selling his soul to Abdissa simply because he thinks that he can save his seat, because Abdissa has direct access to the Eretz Kilo political power. So I think the conflict that we often see is a conflict that the people who hold the power use those powers in order to either rob or ambush the little guys. The Ethiopian Church, Orthodox Church, Tewahedo Church, historically owned 1/3 of Ethiopia's land, particularly agricultural land that are located in the Oromo, Sidama, Afar, and fertile regions. That had continued for generations. And as you know, the church was always the number one arm that the government used in order to legitimize its government. It never sought, the Ethiopian government never sought legitimacy from the people, from the peasants, from the regional government, or from the Muslim, which in my opinion is the largest religious group, although it's always downplayed. The government always received its legitimacy from the church and those who are affiliated with the church. So this is now being ended. Ethiopia has passed through so many years. The old Ethiopian exceptionalism is falling at the seams. You can no longer hold Ethiopia together by appealing to the Christian West and telling the Priester John story that says Ethiopia is an island, a Muslim island, so the West should come. I think that those days are gone. Today, Somalis feel more affinity with Tigray because of massacre and atrocities and genocide that they have seen, as much as Tigrays now understand the genocide that Somalis were subject to in 2010, 2014. So I think the entire Ethiopian thinking, as Mabel was saying, the thinking of the people of Ethiopia have completely shifted. You can no longer approach Ethiopia the way the West either approached, the Western scholars, who 90% of them were Jesuits, who felt Ethiopia as a Christian state to be saved and safeguarded. That's no longer is on the table. We have seen the Ethiopian Orthodox Church being silent when atrocities and human rights violations were committed against Tigrayans in mass, despite the fact that the top person in the church claims to have hailed from Tigray. So I think the Ethiopian Orthodox Church's current conundrum is mainly, in my opinion, when you come to the Oromo issue, theology liberation. Oromos want to remain Orthodox Christians, but their own Orthodox Christians. They want to remain Christians, at least to those that are Christians, they want to remain Christians with their own language, control their land, probably regain the land that they lost to the church. And how can we reunite this? I think it's very difficult when people don't see the other person is right to unite. So as I said earlier, we need a serious engagement with the Amhara elite, who would want, on the one hand, to keep Ethiopia's unity, but at the same time denying people's rights to come to their senses, sit around the table and talk to people. In terms of the greater Horn of Africa and Somalia and Somaliland and what have you, I think Somalia in general did very well when it comes to making sure that the country doesn't descend back to violence. If you recall, the last 30 years, the government in Mogadishu, for right or wrong reasons, did not really put any pressure on Somaliland. But I think Somaliland just maximized its demands and refused negotiation on the territorial integrity of Somalia and the national sovereignty of Somalia. No nation walks away its own sovereignty so easily. So I think it's probably time that we look at Somalia in its holistic form and see if we can bring the forces together, reunite Somalia so that for the interests of the region, Somalia is a partner with a peaceful Ethiopia. I like what Michael said. Ethiopia is not going to get peace and a chance to recover from what it has seen unless Prime Minister Abiy A understands what he has done, B comes into public to accept a full-blown, unmitigated transformative justice, if you will. I wouldn't even, I would really put it very high in a way that they are fully accountable for what happened. And then after that, talk about unifying the country, even if that has to cost, as Getachew was saying, putting people like Abiy, people like Getachew under the radar of justice. You cannot really bury under the rug what had happened in Tigray. You cannot also bury under the rug what happened to Somalis between 2008 to 2014, where the Ogaden region was blockaded for months and months, and about 10,000 people at least died within a short period of time. Ethiopia needs a holistic reconciliation where transformative justice is applied and people who have committed crimes, political and human rights crimes, are put into justice.
Thank you so much, Faisal. I know our program is slowly but surely coming to an end. I wanted to, since this program is going to be broadcasted on different media platforms and the likes of Ambassador Ridwan Hussein and even people within Arat Kilo and the government and Tigray and also Washington, D.C., and a lot of people are tuning in. And this is going to also be pre-recorded. I wanted to ask and circle back to Mabel. You and your family have been directly impacted by the ongoing situation in Tigray. You are joining us on this platform with those involved in impacting your life, the life of your family and your loved ones. What message would you like to communicate to Ambassador Ridwan, who's unable to join but will be watching and will be hopefully reaching out, Getachew Reda, and Ambassador Mike Hammer, and other leaders who play a role in the direct impact on so many lives?
Well, thank you for that question, and thank you for the opportunity to answer that. Really quickly, before I do answer that, I just wanted to mention there was a mention earlier about Tigrayans being a part of the oppressed group, except for 30 years of EPRDF, and that kind of language is what's caused this. That is a part of the hate speech. That's a part of the mythology as to why Tigrayans are being targeted. During EPRDF, Tigrayans were not, within Tigray and some in the diaspora as well, were not living a luxurious life full of this and that. No, Tigrayans were still very much struggling. There were barely roads. It was a lot of issues within Tigray. So for this idea to continue, even after the genocide has taken hold, after all of the things that we've experienced, for it to still be said today is disappointing. But I just want to clarify that that's not actually factual. There may have been Tigrayans that lived in Addis and other places that were making a lot of money, living a great life and what have you. But within Tigray, that was not the case for many, many, many Tigrayans. And to answer the question that was just asked, I'd like to share my disappointment. I'd like to share my disappointment with all the men that are here. Hafsa is the only other woman, but millions have died. Hundreds of thousands of women have experienced conflict-related sexual violence, which is mass rape. Rape at a level that is so atrocious, it's genocidal. Genocidal rape is being used against Tigrayan women, hundreds and thousands of them. Thousands are still starving today. Medical aid is not available. In fact, I was reading today that medical aid is more expensive than beer within Tigray right now. And that's the reality that Tigrayans are facing. Networks is still not working. We could see when Getachew was here, he was having a hard time connecting. His network kept going in and out. That is still happening. Many Tigrayans have not spoken to their family members. Many Tigrayans are missing their family members, unsure who has died and who has not. I've only been able to speak to a very select few of my family members, and I'm grateful for being able to speak to them after almost 3 years, but I still have not spoken to the rest of them. And that is the reality, again, for the majority of Tigrayans. The majority of Tigrayans that are living in Tigray that do not have any connection to the diaspora, that do not have any connection to the outside world, are starving to death, are still living in caves and what have you. Nothing has truly changed. And yet we are at a place where we're talking about peace, about the next day, about this and that. The IDP centers are still full of Tigrayans trying to figure out what's going to happen today, not tomorrow, because they can't think that far. They're still here trying to survive today. This is our reality right now. And so I am incredibly, incredibly disappointed. And I would hope that the change, although it's going to take its time and there's a process and what have you, it would be faster than this. We are past 3 months since the COHA was signed, and yet still it is very, very, very slow. Today's excitement on Twitter from Tigrayans that are in Tigray is the fact that they were able to go to the bank. 1 or 2 of them were able to go to the bank and take some money out. That is, again, a luxury for Tigrayans living in Tigray. That is not a luxury for you and I living here who are able to join the Zoom. That is an actual luxury to be able to go and get $5 from the bank. And so I'm incredibly, incredibly disappointed that this is still our reality. I'm incredibly disappointed that Eritrean forces are still within Tigray, because that is affecting us. Women, again, are being re-raped by these forces, and yet all we can do is come and have a conversation about it. The lack of action that has been taken in Tigray is incredibly disappointing, and I'm saying that now as loud as I can, because the men that are a part of this are able to do something about it, and have been able to do something about it for almost 3 years and have not. And the things that they have done have been very slow or less than acceptable, in my opinion. I'm not willing to accept what has been done for Tigray, and I don't think any person should accept what has been done for Tigray or continues to be done to Tigray and to Tigrayans. I am disappointed, I am upset, and I am angry because this is happening to my family, and it shouldn't be happening to any family at all. None. I'm so, so angry, and my anger will probably continue forever. The trauma that Tigrayans have experienced is not going to go away, and it is every single Tigrayan that has experienced this trauma. It is not just Tigrayans within Tigray. It is not just the diaspora. It's every single Tigrayan that is from Tigray has experienced trauma that will never leave them. And so what are we to do with this trauma? The women that have experienced CRSV are the ones that are taking care of other women who have experienced CRSV. No one is helping them. The children who are experiencing these traumas are not in school. They have missed almost 3 years of school, and they were missing school before then too, because of COVID, because of locusts, because of all types of things. What is going to happen to them? So when we're talking about accountability, we're talking about justice, we're talking about peace processes that are not inclusive of women nor anyone else. The only people that are being included are GOT and GOE. That is not acceptable. That is not something that should be accepted by anyone. Hundreds of thousands of women have been mass raped. Genocidal rape has been used against them, and they are being shut out of a peace process that includes their future. That is unacceptable. That is not something that everybody should say okay to. I'm very upset, and I'm thankful for this question that I'm able to express my anger, because for a woman who has experienced rape, who has to take care of herself, who has to take care of the children that are around her, who has to then take care of the future of Tigray, to be excluded from a peace I'm putting it in quotations, a peace process that affects her is disgusting and it's disrespectful. And so I'm very disappointed, and I'm hopeful that the men who have the power to do something about it, because these are all men who are doing this. These are men who raped these women. These are men who killed these people. And these are men who are doing a peace process, excluding others. And so I hope that these men hear me very, very, very clearly and take actual action in stopping this, because this is not ending in Tigray. It is continuing in Ethiopia. It's continuing in the Horn. It is continuing throughout Africa. And African men need to be a part of the change for all Africans, all of us. It cannot be on women who are being forgotten and pushed back. It's not acceptable, and I am angry. Thank you.
Thank you, Naba. I'd second and validate those expressions and feelings. It's true that women are completely left out of this discourse and in general in peace processes, even though they are the most susceptible to violence and rape and displacement. And I'm hoping Ambassador Mike Hammer, Getachew Reda, Ambassador Ridwan, and even people within the federal government take that into strong consideration when they are, later participating in upcoming conversations and viewing this pre-recording. I wanted to, before we conclude our conversation today, I will give a moment to each panelist, and I'll start off with Michael Rubin. What important message would you share with our viewers and the greater public today? And what is your, again, concluding message on peace and change and transitional justice in the Horn of Africa during this difficult time?
Well, first of all, peace and transitional justice aren't going to be easy. It's going to be a generational program. My message to your audience would be, let me put it this way. My advice to your audience would be that if you want to influence American policy outside the Horn of Africa, in Europe and so forth, it's important not only to write for Ethiopian or Tigrayan portals, but actually to write, because the issues in the Horn of Africa should be at the top stage of the international discussion. Therefore, there's no reason why both the victims of or activists involved in gender-based violence, or members of the elected government, or members of the opposition, or former fighters can't write for the New York Times, can't write for the Washington Post, can't write for the Wall Street Journal. That should be who your audience is if you want to influence American policy. Simply to complain that the Americans don't understand on chat forums or Twitter that are only read by others who are outside of Washington isn't going to help. So in sum, my advice is it shouldn't be me who's writing about the Horn of Africa for the American audience. It should be you and those watching this program, regardless of what your perspective is. It's important that no one filter your perspective and that you give it directly to the American audience. Thank you.
Thanks. I'd like to ask Chris Roble for his concluding thoughts, his overall message on peace and transitional justice and change in the Horn of Africa.
Yeah, I don't expect, just as Michael said, a quick solution to Ethiopia's political crisis and political problems. I read what Mabel is saying in terms of how the level of trauma that Tigrawa women have been subjected to. And I think I said in many programs that it will not take to heal 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. This nation would take years and years and years and generations to deal with this, and it will not go away because political actors who, as she said, mainly are men, talked in a smoky room will resolve this. Nobody would want today in earth to be in the shoes that Tigray people are, to be honest with you, what they have seen and and I've been very vocal about this issue. In terms of Ethiopia's direction, I don't think you can have your cake, have it and eat it. You cannot have peace and reconciliation and what have you in Tigray, but at the same time carry the longest and most largest scale war in Oromia. Just is Abiy ready to repeat what he has done in Tigray now in Oromia? Because while we see some positive activities, although it might not be satisfactory to everybody in the Tigray front, The Ethiopian government is starting a huge war in Oromia. The Somali region is becoming literally anarchic in many ways. Most people may not know, and Michael is right. If you don't take the message to the people who make decisions for the world, they may never hear. The Somali region is one of the most volatile region from point of corruption, from point of security. Things are festering. The relationship between Somalia and the Ethiopian Somali region is not good. Somaliland and Region 5 are at loggerheads with each other. That whole area is being forgotten both by the world as well as by Ethiopia. So I think maybe we will need to take a look at the Tigray issue in a very, very serious way. Not window dress issues, not reach a quick solution. I welcome the cessation of hostility. I welcome the silencing of the guns, because I think the TPLF leadership is genuine when they say that what they have now was the only solution that they can get. Michael, I disagree with you. We talked to America left and right. America has heard us full ears. Mabel and young generation cried out of their language for the last 2 years. What we got it some lukewarm reception. So it was not because of lack of effort. It was because of America's strategic priorities, which doesn't usually sit well with the little people. You are a Jew man and you understand what happened in the Second World War. For many, many years, America, neglected what the Germans were doing until last minute. And now we are doing a last minute, band-aid solution to the Tigray issue. And I welcome that. Nothing is worse, than people dying on a daily. So I think, Mabel, I like to give credit to the leadership of Tigray. They did what they could do under the circumstances. They were on the verge of annihilation between the forces of Abiy and Eritrea. They fought like a woman, like a man, stood their ground is. But this is what we get it. And let's work with what we have to the extent possible. And people like Michael really can be advocate for us. Thank you.
Now, Mabel, your closing thoughts before I close off the program today.
Sure, thank you. I feel like more inclusive dialogue, like similar to this, is important and it's helpful. I think we need to speak to each other. We have not done a good job of doing that for the past 3 years. All of us need to be in conversation with each other. Oromo, Amhara, Afar, Tigrayan, like all of us need to be able to speak to each other, and we need to feel heard. We Tigrayans have felt voiceless. We have been saying we are voiceless for the past 3 years, and to have that feeling is very minimizing and diminishing. And I'm sure that others feel that way too within Ethiopia. And so being able to actually have dialogue across the board within different nation states, ethnicities, I think is really important. And I think that will be the way towards a sustainable future, be it as peaceful as possible. But I really feel like dialogue is the only way currently. And also actual accountability and justice and inclusion. And that means including women in all things across the board. And so again, I'm really thankful for this opportunity, and thank you so much for everything you're doing, Hafsa.
Thank you, Mabel. To close off the program, Minnesota Institute of Horn of Africa Studies wants to thank all the panelists, Faisal, Mabel, Ambassador Mike Hammer, Gatachu Reda, and Michael Rubin, and our viewers for tuning in to this important discussion. We hope to see more discourse and public engagements on the current events of the Horn of Africa and do our part in supporting peace efforts and transitional justice. I also want to acknowledge the many communities who have reached out and expressed their support and concerns, and we hope to be more inclusive as time progresses in the near future. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and we'll conclude there. Thank you, everyone.